printing press. History. The printing press is a device that allows for the mass production of uniform printed matter, mainly text in the form of books, pamphlets, and newspapers. Created in China, the printing press revolutionized society there before being further developed in Europe in the 15th century by Johannes Gutenberg and his invention of the Gutenberg Press. No one knows when the first printing press was invented or who invented it, but the oldest known printed text originated in China during the first millennium AD. The Diamond Sutra, a Buddhist book from Dunhuang, China, from around 868 AD during the Tang Dynasty, is said to be the oldest known printed book. The Diamond Sutra was created with a method known as block printing, which utilized panels of hand-carved wood blocks in reverse. The Diamond Sutra. The book was printed on a 17.5-foot long scroll of the sacred Buddhist text. The Diamond Sutra is relatively short, only 6,000 words, and is part of a larger canon of sutras or sacred texts. Susan Whitfield, director of the Dunhuang Project, explains that in Buddhist belief, copying image or the words of the Buddha was a good deed and way of gaining merit. That's one reason printing developed early on in China, Whitfield explains. If you can print multiple copies, and the more copies you're sending out, the more you're disseminating the word of Buddha, and so the more merit you are sending out into the world. She writes, and so the Buddhists were very quick to recognize the use of the new technology of printing. Some other texts have survived from Dunhuang as well, including a printed calendar from around 877 AD. Such things include mathematic charts, a vocabulary guide, etiquette instruction, funeral and wedding guides, children's educational material, dictionaries, and almanacs. It was during this period of early printing that rolled-up scrolls began to be replaced by book-formatted texts. Woodblock printing was also used in Japan and Korea at the time, and metal block printing was also developed at some point during that period, typically for Buddhist and Taoist texts. Bisheng. Movable type, which replaced panels of printing blocks with movable individual letters that could be reused, was developed by Bisheng and Hingshan Ubei from Yingshan, Ubei, China, and lived roughly from 970 to 1051 AD. The first movable type was carved into clay. He composed text by placing the types side by side on an iron plate coated with a mixture of resin, wax, and paper ash. Bisheng did not use wood because the texture is inconsistent and absorbs moisture too easily, and also presents a problem of sticking in the ink. The baked clay also cleaned up for better use. By the time of the Southern Song Dynasty, which ruled from 1127 to 1279 AD, books had become prevalent in society and helped create a scholarly class of citizens who had the capabilities to become civil servants. Massive printed book collections also became a status symbol for the wealthy class. Wang Zhen. Wood type made a comeback in 1297. Wang Zhen devised a process to make the wood more durable and precise. He then created a revolving table for typesetters to organize with more efficiency, which led to greater speed in printing. Nung Shu, also known as the Book of Agriculture, is considered the world's first mass-produced book. It helped rural farmers maximize efficiency of producing yields and taught farmers how to use various agricultural tools. The Nung Shu was an incredibly long book even for its own time, which had over 110,000 written Chinese characters. It was exported to Europe and coincidentally documented many Chinese inventions that have been traditionally attributed to Europeans. Wang Zhen's method of woodblock type continued to be used by printers in China. Johannes Gutenberg. In Europe, the printing press did not appear until 150 years after Wang Zhen's innovation. Goldsmith and inventor Johannes Gutenberg was a political exile from Mainz, Germany, when he began experimenting with printing in Strasbourg, France in 1440. He returned to Mainz several years later, and by 1450 had a printing machine perfected and ready to use commercially called the Gutenberg Press. The Gutenberg Press. Integral to Gutenberg's design was replacing wood with metal and printing blocks with each letter, creating the European version of movable type. In order to make the type available in large quantities and to different stages of printing, Gutenberg applied the concept of replica casting. Researchers have speculated that Gutenberg actually used a sand casting system that uses carved sand to create the metal molds. The letters were fashioned to fit together to create even lines of letters. Gutenberg's process was worked seamlessly because he made his own ink, which fixed to metal rather than wood. Gutenberg used a wine press to flatten printing paper, which is traditionally used to press grapes for wine and olives for oil. The Gutenberg Bible. In 1452, Gutenberg produced the one book to come out of his shop, a Bible. It's estimated he printed 180 copies of the 1,300-page Gutenberg Bible, as many as 60 of them on vellum. Each page of the Bible contained 42 lines of text in Gothic type with double columns and featuring some letters in color. For the Bible, Gutenberg used 300 separate molded letter blocks and 50,000 sheets of paper. Many fragments of the books survive. There are 21 complete copies of the Gutenberg Bible and 4 complete copies of the vellum version. The books also vary in their typography and degree of decoration. Gutenberg originally used red ink to print the title headings or rubrics before each of the books of the Bible. And here's a video kind of going over that process of using the Gutenberg Press. And this one is the last one that's functional.
He just took a bowl, put a handle on it, stuffed it with horsehair, and covered it with, guess what? Gänsefleisch, goose skin. So he finally made use of his thing. I don't know why he used goose skin, but it must have worked really well because Bibles that are still in existence are just beautiful. So this is the way he would roll the ink onto the ink ball by turning, rocking, and rolling it onto the ink ball. So hence we know that Gutenberg was the first rock and roller. Now he used 2 ink balls because that would speed up the process of inking. So he has to rub the ink balls together so that they're both exactly the same. We've got to get the ink perfectly smooth over the whole surface of the ink ball, the same thickness, and evenly distributed. So rolling up the balls did take a little practice and a little skill, and also a little time to get it just right. What do you think? That look pretty smooth?
That's very nice.
These are Gutenberg lollipops. How about a lick? Nobody likes licorice.
Well, ever since that first.
Okay. Now we have to come straight down with the ink balls to get the ink just on the tops of those letters. If we went like that, it'd smear off onto the edges, wouldn't fill the letters in. So coming straight down, we begin to apply the ink to the tops of those letters. The person that did this became known as the beater. And of course, it took a little practice and skill to do this, because we have to get a little ink on every letter, and we can't get too much on a letter because that would just fill it in. We'll get a good impression for you guys and gals. So I'll take a little time here to get it well inked. Okay, I think we're about ready to go.
We printed.
What's the next?
How many? 120.
Don't interrupt me, please. Okay, now I forgot where I was at.
You were asking us the next
I'm
step.
inking the type, okay. What's the next thing he has to have to print on?
Paper.
Well, something to print on. He printed about 180 copies of that first Bible, 40 of them on animal skin, and the rest of them he was able to print on paper. Paper had just been invented in China, and had come to Europe through Italy. Now the paper was being made for the scribes, and so it was hard and slick, didn't work very well with Gutenberg's oil-based ink. So he had to soften the paper by dampening it. Now I knew that if he just laid a sheet on like this and rolled it under there, he couldn't make, and roll it into, let's see. He's got to figure out how to print on the other side and line it up exactly. And so here's the answer to that problem, the tympan and the frisket. I'll open it up here. This is called the tympan. It's just leather over a frame that provides a place for us to put our paper on. These little points called duckbills position it up and down. And then the mark left and right here. Now watch this. These pins poke through the paper. And when he prints on the other side, he puts the paper back on through those same holes. And that gives him perfect alignment between the front and the back. It's still basically the same system that's used on printing presses even today, pin register. Now the frisket comes down to hold the paper against the tympan. It's cut out there where we're going to print. It also allows us to lift that paper back up off that sticky type without smearing it or tearing it because it's damp. So we're ready to fold the bed of the press under the platen. The next thing that happens is pull the handle, which turns the screw and lowers the platen and presses the paper against the inky type. The person that did this was called a very exotic name, the puller. So we're going to have some of you guys and gals be pullers. We're going to make 2 impressions. So let's have, why don't you come and do our first impression? 2 hands up there and pull it towards you as
Hard as you can.
Make a good impression.
Don't break it. When President Monson was here, he pulled that thing, and I said, "Don't break it." About brought the house down. He really pulled it though. He moved the press a little bit.
Okay, now notice the size of the platen is really quite small. Because the bigger the platen is, the more power it takes to get sufficient impression. So we just printed the 1 page, so we've got to roll it out and get the other page. Now we'd like to have some of the gals do it. How about
Go for it, Sabrina.
Gutenberg did.
that all day long? All right, now we're going to roll it out. Now listen quiet, man. You can hear the frisket. Lift that paper
This is called
off that sticky
the
top.
press kiss.
Oh boy.
We did pretty good.
Wow.
You did a pretty good inking job and a pretty good pulling job.
So with this technology has been the stem of where we are today, or the basis of where we are today. Peter Chauffeur. Chauffeur made use of Gutenberg's press, as we last saw, as soon as it was acquired, and he is considered to be technically a better printer and typographer than Gutenberg. Within 2 years of seizing Gutenberg's press, he produced an acclaimed version of the Book of Psalms that featured a 3-color title page and varying types within the book. Printing press through Europe. As you can see from this right-hand graphic, in 1450 there was only one printing press, but throughout, or about 50 years later, it moved and developed all across Europe, ending in, well, not ending, but in 1500. After Germany, Italy became the next recipient of Gutenberg's invention when the printing press was brought to the country in 1465. By 1470, Italian printers began to make printed matter. By 1476, other German printers had moved to Paris and set up private companies. Spain welcomed German printers in 1473 in Valencia, spreading to Barcelona in 1475. Gutenberg's invention was brought to England in 1476. Changing the world. The worldwide spread of the printing press meant a greater distribution of ideas that threatened the power structures of Europe. By 1605, the first official newspaper, Relation, was printed and distributed in Strasbourg. Newspapers appeared all across Europe, formalizing the printing press's contribution to the growth of literacy, education, and the far-reaching availability of uniform information for ordinary people. So there are some other further developments from Gutenberg's press, some of what I'm going to be talking about, just different developments and different ways of producing print. So this one is etching, 1515. Etching was used in the Middle Ages as a way to decorate metal arms and armor. The process involves making prints from a metal plate, which is usually either copper or zinc. The plate is coated in an acid-resistant substance, commonly referred to as etching ground, before it's drawn on with a sharp tool. The plate is then placed in the acid, which removes the areas not protected by the etching ground. This creates recessed lines which hold the ink. To finish off, the plate is placed on paper and sent through a press to create the print. And I encourage you to also watch a video on how etching is done. Lithograph, 1796. Lithography is a technique which is still commonly used today. It revolves around the relationship between oil and water, which repel each other. An image is drawn onto limestone with an oil-based medium such as a wax crayon. The stone is then covered in a solution of gum arabic. Using lithographic turpentine, the solution is then removed, which allows the ink to take only where it's required. Let the ink rest on the stone and then get into the cracks. And here's another YouTube video for you guys to watch if you're interested. The Rotary Press, 1843. Invented by Richard Marcho, The rotary press was the natural successor of the printing press. It worked by using cylinders, which the images to be printed were curved around. This was a lot faster than the old printing press and allowed for paper to be continuously fed through the press. Offset printing, 1875. Although it was developed almost 150 years ago, offset printing remains almost unchanged today and is the most popular way of printing large runs. It works by transferring the ink from a plate to a rubber blanket and then to the printing surface. It's commonly used today in combination with the lithograph process to produce large runs of magazines, posters, and other large format prints. Screen printing, 1910. Screen printing was invented in China during the Song Dynasty between 960 to 1279 AD, but it didn't take off in Europe until the early 1910s when silk stock became more available. The technique involves pushing ink through a mesh stencil onto textiles or paper. It's a popular technique used often for t-shirt printing. Inkjet printing, 1951. Thanks to inkjet printing, direct contact with paper is no longer required. Ink can now be applied by spraying it through jets. Inkjet printers each feature a print head containing thousands of tiny holes. These tiny openings drop microscopic droplets of ink onto the paper in the printer at a certain speed. Inkjet machines use the liquid ink produced by a colored dye. Laser printing, 1969. This advanced method produces high-quality images by passing a laser beam back and forth over a negatively charged cylinder within the printer. It then collects electrically charged powdered ink to transfer the image to the paper. Laser printers use an electrical charge to attract toner particles to a transfer roller. Toner particles are pressed onto a piece of paper while heat and pressure from the fusor unit permanently fix the image onto the page. Digital printing, 1991. Digital printing made it possible to print straight from a digital file. Digital printing takes a different approach and assembles the images ready for print from a complex set of numbers and formulas. Oh, typo. These images are captured from pixels, and the digitized image is used to control the deposition of ink, toner, and exposure to replicate the image you would like to print. "3D printing, 1986. Where 3D printing was only suitable for prototyping and one-off manufacturing in the early stages, it is now rapidly transforming into a production technology. 3D printing encompasses many forms of technologies and materials, as 3D printing is being used in almost all industries, including dental, prosthetics, fossil reconstruction, movie props, industrial products, and consumer products." So my ending question or ending thought is, what do you think is going to be the next printing? And how much further do you think we can go with it? Thank you.